All right, this is I think seven. Was it seven? Six if the possessions? No, it's session six. This is eight, seven, six, seven,
Bingo.
six, seven, eight. This is session eight. Can you believe that we stretched this? Sorry, this is session eight of Earthly Possessions. Tonight we're looking at three books. I originally was gonna start. I started reading them in a different order than I think I'm going to present them. The Decluttering the Speed is actually a good book. It's very practical, but I think if I were to rank these in terms of the general um, uh, influence over culture, would be declutter, or would be the Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing by Marie Kondo. Um, it
Because
was
of its popularity or
no,
because
not necessarily. It was just more. It was more. Um, the things that she talks about are precursors to, like, I would say that you would start with this and then you would go to this, because this is a little bit more of a method. This is a larger methodology that speaks to the mindset. She talks a lot about mindset. And if you can get, in other words, she doesn't name this, but having just taught this in the pastoral care class that I was just teaching, cognitive behavioral therapy is a late last century therapy that came out that basically kind of says if you can trace your thinking back to the roots of the problem of why you think that way, you can, and then you can recognize that, you can change the thinking, and then you can build your way back out from it. So the concept is assumes a rationality, assumes a ability for authentic self-reflection, but the idea behind it is if you want to change, I'm trying to think, I don't have a good example off the top of my head. Hoarding. Why do you hoard? Go back and you find, well, one of them says the root of all hoarding or saving things is um, fear of the future. I don't know, somewhere fear of the future, and something of the past, and I don't even know. We'll come to it because I wrote it down somewhere. And when we look at it, I think it's in the Marie Kondo. But in the end, you have some philosophy of thinking. If you change how you think about stuff, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're thinking. We've dug around in it. We've looked at it historically, we've looked at it biblically, we looked at it psychologically, we looked at it socially, and in terms of business and economics. We looked at it from all these different angles to sort of say, how do we get into the situation? We have more stuff than we know we need. What does the Bible say about it, and how do we get out of it? This is like if you want to just declutter your life. This is not deep cleaning. This is not major getting rid of stuff. This, on the other hand, is like get rid of this is the premise behind the and I'll talk more about it in a second. The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning is the best gift of love and consideration you could give to those whom you love is to take care of this stuff before you pass it on, because we are one of the few generations that are dealing with this level of stuff. So we have new methods of how to deal with stuff. And I think this comes, in other words, I don't think this 2 centuries ago would have been a book that anyone would have needed.
Right.
I guess that's what I'm saying. This would have not have been a book that anyone would have needed. This book is about living life and living it differently and organizing life differently. And this is a response to our current situation based out of far more basic principles, probably going down back to Japanese philosophy to some extent, and just thinking about how we actually process the way we move through life. I mean, harmony, balance, all those sort of things. And then the minute you start mentioning harmony and balance and you think about the stuff that we have accumulated, you're like, well, that's not even close to being balanced. So it's finding that sense of balance. Okay.
Jason,
Yeah.
you hand that book to Ben, have him hand it down.
Oh, this one? Yeah, you can, and you're all welcome to borrow these, and skim through them. None of them are very difficult to read. I didn't even read them all. I just sort of flipped through them and I did what I call a PhD reading. I can tell you what's in the book and how it's organized and what the author's argument is, but I did not read every word in that book. Okay, let's start with Marie Kondo, The Magic of Tidying Up, which I think is interestingly subtitled, the subtitle is The Japanese Art of decluttering and organizing. And it's distinctly named that because those are two phases. There's the decluttering, there's the getting rid of stuff, there's the purging, there's the determining what you need to keep. It's like if this is the entirety of your stuff, it's like going through all of it. This is all going somewhere, and there's multiple places where that can go. The what is left now under a certain criteria rubric for keeping it, these things now, how do I organize and live those in such a way, and how do I frame my mindset around home, that in such a way that these things are a accurate expression of how you want to live your life. And honestly, some people just are hoarders. I think that's a psychological condition. I think there's lots of types of hoarders. And and some people aren't. Some people don't want stuff. So, I mean, it comes in all varieties. But for those of us who have been caught up in it, obviously 9 million copies is no small number of books sold to people who want to organize their stuff. And if we've sold that many books, obviously that's 9 million homes that are probably really junky. Because if you went as far as to buy a book about how to declutter your life, that just represents those who are self-aware enough that are actually trying to self-help and seek it out. There's probably 90 million that are like, I'm fine, I'll just keep shoving it in the closet. So a couple sort of big category things. This book deals with again, mindset of how to change how we think and live. It's not about decluttering. It is about decluttering, but the root of it is this is a lifestyle book. It's designed to say, not I'm going to read this, I'm going to pick up some things, and I'm going to kind of implement. Really, what she's calling for in a process is radical change in your life. And her belief is that if you can do this whole process and you actually go through this, what'll happen, it'll be so life transforming that you will stop acquiring stuff. You'll stop having clutter everywhere because you see and experience the value. You need that reinforcement. So many of her methods are based around the practical application of principle. One of her principles is you do it all in one go. You don't do it over a little while, because if you do it over a little while, you end up failing. And that's when she goes through a list of things of why she thinks other methods fail. One of them is if you're going to do it, you do it. So,
rip that Band-Aid off.
well, you do. You start. I mean, and it's not It's not like you do it in a weekend. It could be a year-long process. But it's like if you're gonna start the process, don't do it halfway. Do it all the way and keep going through. She talks about the mindset towards order. And whenever I think about order, I said this on Sunday, I think there's something about order. God ordered the disorder as a way of that. Sometimes we'll see the creation again. We claim that God created ex nihilo. I 100% agree with that. I confess that the idea that God, everything that is matter, everything that is in existence comes through God. But in that creation of that, and if you're going to acknowledge that and you're going to admit that, and that's going to be part of your, that everything comes from God, that means that everything that is evil also comes from God. Because you can't say everything if there was nothing there and God created something, how he created, the manner in which he created it, the rules around which he created are all credit to God. So for me, I don't have a problem with that. I'll call God the author of sin. I don't really care. Like, who am I to judge? If God was the author of sin, who am I to judge God for doing that? And the moment you do judge God for doing that, you're probably walking on some thin ice. You're in the danger zone. But that sense of God took that which is disordered and began to put order in it. And I think that salvation is that. We live in a state of disorder, and God is seeking to bring order. So if you want to see disorder as self-preservation versus order as self-giving, that's in the schema of the divine. That's the way it functions. Her whole philosophy is an act of restoring balance among people, their stuff, and your home. So again, it goes back to this Japanese philosophy of yin and yang. And I think, growing up, I'm not saying who, but my mom never let me put yin and yang because she said it was like, Chinese or something. Yeah, my dad had like acupuncture out the wazoo everywhere and was very into Chinese medicine and Eastern medicine. Um, but that sense of the yin and the yang, and there's some in the sense of balance, there's something about it. I mean, last year when we studied world religions, and I remember looking at Buddhism and Taoism and all these things, they're talking about balance. It makes like, I think we're called to be balanced too. It goes back to like we were talking about last week, the dopamine thing, that the balance in your brain between pain and pleasure, your mind wants that sense of equilibrium. So that very notion of the tidying up as an act of restoring balance in human beings, the sense of well-being of self. If everything in your life was tidied up and all of the junk that you don't want was out of your life and everything had its place and you were living a life of order, I bet we can all imagine it's kind of like why hotels are actually kind of peaceful at times, other than like if you have a black light and you look around. They're gross in that regard, but they're orderly places. I used to travel with one, and then I stopped.
Oh,
Yeah, it did. Well, it really wasn't helpful. It was not helpful. But when you go into a hotel room, you know what I mean? Everything is in order. Everything is neat. It's simple.
Extra either.
You don't. And the truth is, you could probably live there for months and you really would be fine. And you don't really need a whole lot. But in that sense, and it's that sense of order and, establishing that sense of order in one's life. Tidying is what she calls a physical act of two different things. And this goes back to the decluttering, the organizing, deciding to keep something. We'll go into that more in a second, and deciding where to put what you keep. So if you think about it philosophically, is if you took everything that you owned in your entire life, if you have a house, if you have a place in Texas or in some storage unit, or everything that you owned in one location, and you said, okay, I'm going to go through this and I'm going to declutter it. Everything that I don't want is going to come out, and then that's going to go to a bunch of different categories, and then you're left with whatever else is left. Is how do I organize that? So those are two steps, and it's important to understand. Because if you're just trying to, and I'll go into this, some of the myths, that if you just store things better, if you have a better organization system, actually all of them say the same thing. Storage containers really aren't great. I mean, they're useful to some extent once you figure out what you want to keep, but if you're just using them to store more and more and more, they're just tomes or prisons for stuff that really doesn't really add anything to your life other than baggage. We all know what it's like to pull that drawer out. That's, every now and then we all have a drawer that like you just put all sorts of junk in. It's where twisty ties and rubber bands and paper clips often find themselves separated from their tribes. And then every now and then in life, we've all done this. We pull that drawer out and we start to pull stuff out. And what's the first thing you do? You choose what you're getting rid of versus what you're keeping. And then you can decide what you're keeping. In fact, when we cleaned my mom's house, that was kind of the method we approached. If it was trash, and then we had all these categories over here: trash, donation, recycle, etc. So what is her method? Her method is roughly speaking fivefold. First is discarding. She calls it the Marie Kondo method, or what is it called? It was called something else. The Kondo, KonMari, something like that. It's some deviation of her name. But discarding by category, and in this way, she differs. Some people say go room to room. She does not advocate going to room. She advocates going category to category, which they kind of all tap into. But clothing is a huge thing, and I think Americans, we just have way too much clothing, and I think if we took all of our clothing, we put it out on the bed, it would just be mounded and mounded and mounded of so much stuff that we don't need or don't wear. Books she talks about, and this is why Shannon completely rejects her methods, because she says anyone who would get rid of books is
Even.
so papers, and then miscellany, and then finally getting to the memory stuff. And I think that's kind of like really, and if you think about it, when you think about clothing, books, and things like that, and I'm sure there are other categories that fit in there too. Those are things that we continually buy and don't get rid of. Some people do. But in general, like, the amount of clothing not, that we have accumulated, and I think books are dependent on if you're a reader or something like that, maybe a videotape, maybe it could be games. Papers, I think we live in a digital age, and I think unfortunately we have to say to ourselves, getting, you these days you probably have access to all of your bank statements and if you need them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't access them, we've got bigger issues to worry about than you finding your bank statements, because it means that whole system has crashed. And whether or not, and at that point, your concern will be more, how do I get the money out of the bank versus anything else. So discard by categories, break categories into subcategories. So in the clothing, you break down. Let's go through all the socks. We're going to go through my socks. We're going to go through my underwear. We're going to go through my jeans. We're going to go through my shirts, and just start getting rid of. And the goal of it is like to do that all in one go, so that when you're done, you're like, all of the clothing in my house is now set. All of the books in my house are now set. Now, papers are probably a big thing. I think in particular for this, photos would be a huge thing, but that would fall under memories or, miscellany. I'd probably put games into that category. And circular saws and things like that.
We weren't gonna let that go.
So breaking it. So again, this is about decluttering, discarding. This is about getting rid of. So buy larger categories and in the subcategories. So in other words, if you want to look at that from a 20,000 foot perspective, methodically go through your stuff. Don't room by room. She doesn't advocate, because there's just too many categories there, and then you end up shifting things, and it's too much to process. So if you go by categories, and this is kind of how when we were cleaning my mom's house out, we were like, okay, I said today, let's go through the whole house and grab every towel we can possibly find. And and you're just taking them all and put them in one location and see what's there, then get rid of the stuff that is ratty and old, and the things that might want to be passed on or could be taken by children or that sort of thing. So the discarding part is huge. That's the decluttering. Now, as a means to it, she says only keep those things that spark joy. And for that, she says pick up everything one thing at a time, and decide whether or not you're going to keep it. And this is called TAT. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but I don't really concern myself with that too much. Which means literally in Japanese means to pick up, to touch, but it also has the connotation or meaning to heal. So, and again, Japanese philosophy is a high of energy. And I'm always tinkering and thinking about this. I think again, in our Western world, we've gotten rid of mysticism and energy and light and spirit in a way that I think is very unhelpful. Because I think it exists in every other part of the world, except for in the Western world, because rationalism has trumped that. The problem is I don't think it's one or the other. I think we're rational beings, but there is a spirit world that we don't understand. And it's holding those two things in tension, like most things, balanced, that makes it work. Her definition of what is joy, I printed something. The criterion is, of course, of whether or not it gives you a thrill of pleasure when you touch it. Take each book in your hand and decide whether it moves you or not. Keep things because you love them, not just because. Sorting the things that inspire joy, and then other things that I wrote down. So inspire joy, thrill of pleasure, speaking to your heart, moves you, things that you love. These are all languages to define. So I don't, it's kind of, this is where she has got the most criticism.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it sounds stupid. Because, this folder here gives me no joy. Does that mean I should get rid of it? No, because it's my notes for all the things I teach.
I think you're just not looking at the definition of
No, I
joy.
think I'm just joking. That's a bad example.
Towels, but you know, if you like these colors and stuff, and those are just like a, you know, it's a different definition of joy.
It is. I mean, and I don't. I think you're right. I think there's some to truth to that. But what's that? No.
Yeah, ignorant.
But it is that sense.
Children are misbehaving. if you
No,
don't
but
say
I mean for games, like for me to hold up a game and to say, is this something that I would want to play? I mean, I think there's a legit thing to that. Like, do I? And this is what, and there's all sorts of stuff about there was this huge, as board games go, everyone bought board games, and now people are realizing I have more board games than I can possibly play, and I'm in that category too. And I'm saying, so there are games on the table up there in the library where that I just am like, I don't know if I bought them with an interest in playing them, but there are so many games I want to play. My desire and joy to play the other ones are far outweigh the desire for that one. And the question is if I don't think I'll ever play it, then why would I keep it? Because if I don't know how to play it, I'm not going to teach it to anyone, and it will literally sit there doing nothing
But
until.
if I touch the lawnmower and I go, this isn't bringing me any joy. And if I contract it out and they want $300, that doesn't bring me any joy.
Well,
I'm stuck. I
Having
have
a
to cut the
nice,
grass.
but
So
having
then
a
you buy a
nice
second
looking lawn after you cut it and knowing you
Yeah, but you
didn't
could
pay
get there.
$300, that brought you joy.
Do away with the lawn.
but there's a
Well,
utilitarian nature in Japanese philosophy as well, and those things would be probably outside the boundary of joy because a lawnmower, for example, would be a necessary thing in order to accomplish something, and it's not an issue.
Oh.
If you had two lawnmowers or 9 circulars, you've been a good sport, Roy, I know.
We all need
It's
joy.
a two-line-
I pointed myself for games too.
Uh,
But I mean, yeah, if you did that, if you went through these 9, obviously I think that you would feel more joy over some saws than over others.
oh, absolutely, for sure.
And that's how you know.
I just have some because
I know, we know.
I acquired them. They came to me.
Yeah, I know.
And
You
I
don't have to
haven't-
justify,
I haven't
Roy, we know.
Japanese cleansed them yet. And I think she's giving a tool to identify what is just the excess stuff and is just the more is better.
Yeah.
We have such a mentality that more is better.
Yeah.
I can tell you definitively 9 circular saws is not better than a couple good ones.
Yeah.
But some of those are in another location that
Yeah.
I might be able to.
And again, those are issues that she's
I
not
mean,
dealing with,
that's
2
rational.
locations. No, but I think there is something.
I think she's giving us a tool by the does it give me joy to say it's excess stuff because
It's a rubric. It's a way to
Yeah.
judge something. And I think it's helpful in that regard. I just think, well, one, I don't like her use of the word joy. For me, joy is a profoundly spiritual thing, and although I do think that she somewhat is tapping into the spiritual side of this, I think the way it has been commodified is more like happiness rather than, I mean, if we really put everything through the filter of genuine joy and Christian joy, most of the stuff should probably go in the trash.
Yeah.
But I think I think it is a measure almost more so to get rid of the things that are definitively don't give you joy or that are extra or that are clutter,
right.
as opposed to an absolute metric to get rid of all the stuff that you need to get rid of. So it allows, and I think I mean, she does have some more rigid rules, but in general, her philosophy would fall into these categories. But so then 4, you see a shift after discarding, and remember, Japanese art of decluttering or discarding, if you could put it, and organizing. After discarding, organize the space thoroughly. Now, the organizing of the space thoroughly is where the decluttering at the speed of light book comes into play a little more. She has a little bit more of a system of organization, which is why we're doing it in this order. She said, and organize the space thoroughly and completely. And this is emphasized and stressed. Don't just declutter it and leave the room a mess. Because then if it's not put into place, then the room is a receptacle for other things. And if you bring order to a room, it's kind of like if you've ever cleaned a floor, sure many of us have. I don't know if anyone, you cleaned a floor, and if one of those floor cleans, you're like, man, this floor is dirty. I'm gonna get down, and you scrub the floor, and then you're done, and you're just looking at it, and you're almost, you're sitting there just staring at the floor, thinking how beautiful it is and clean it is, and then you don't want anyone to walk on the floor. It's and the same principle is once you organize a room and keep it clean, you don't want other things that are outside or that seek to take away from that sense of harmony to enter that room. If it doesn't reach that level of balance or harmony, it is always a place that could potentially come and receive more stuff. So she says, don't you, and two basic principles: don't scatter your storage, keep all your storage in one place, and always keep the same type and the same things in the same place. So don't have, and obviously if you have two homes or two locations, that's not the same thing. You're kind of operating two lives at that point. And that's, I would say, the living in, and other people don't have multiple homes, but living in two homes the way Lake City folks do is kind of, that's why I say this is like Northern Exposure meets Dirty Dancing, because there are summer residents that come up for like long time. 5, do it all in one go, not little by little. She's very strongly results oriented, and she believes that an all in one go at, like, not just like do a room, like if you start this process, you see it through to the end. Because if you can see it through to the end, you'll have changed your home, and you've changed your mindset, changed your home, and given balance to your life. Is it dying? That was it.
It's doing something
I just gotta go over here. Let me see here. Did it turn back on?
No,
Let me see. Hold on 1 second. Oh, it's reconnecting. Oh, that actually might not have been it. No, it's still 19%. I think it was just disconnecting. Probably just some problem with.
Battery saving.
Oh yeah, it might be. So I should probably be juiced up enough here. I think that that's interesting, both in regards to cognitive behavioral therapy, in terms of changing. If you are going through all of your stuff in hand, making decisions, the result of that is you have thoughtfully cleared out your clutter. You have identified the things that matter to you, and now you're organizing them categorically. I mean, it's a step-by-step process in terms of how you go about doing it. So, but she believes if you change your mindset, it will change your life forever. And that result of it would mean that because you are now living that balanced life, that you no longer, what's it doing? Oh, here we go. Hold on. Leave meeting. Okay, report problem. Hold on, folks. CPC. Oh, it's not. Hold on.
Well, if you sell 3 of your 5 homes, that will make you do this.
Yeah, or if you move, Shannon and I have moved 7 times in 24 years. So,
But I had tools in
Well,
Lake
you know what the
City
old-
and
You know what the old adage was? That they should make everybody once every 5 years take everything in their house and take it out to the curb and then bring it back in. And I'll guarantee you, you will not get more stuff. You don't want to have to take it out and have a foot
and you
locker
won't bring it
inspection.
all back in.
Yeah.
You ever had to do that for?
Oh,
your
yeah.
friends? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
All right, we should be back in line. Oops. All right, we're going to carry on with her over here. So 9 themes that and these aren't my themes. I actually stole them from someone else, but they sort of cover. I think I covered all of them, but I wrote them down. Starts and ends with mindset. Oh, the home is a sacred space. I think that's an important thing to think about. It's something we all realize. The home, it is probably the most important place that we dwell and live. And I like what she has to say about the important. I don't think sometimes we just, although it is by default, I think being intentional about that space is something that is very easy to not do and just to sort of live life. Things are alive. This is where, as many in the Western world probably wrestle, but this is where she gets into the feng shui, the yin and the yang energy Feng Shui is the idea that there are principles and proportions within rooms and space as an energy flow. And if you see the world in a mystical sense of energy actually flowing through the world around us, it makes a lot of sense. I'm actually a big proponent of Feng Shui. I don't actually know how it works, but I do believe in a celestial world. And I do believe that sense of, it's kind of one of those things, whether it's conditioned in us, because I think we live in a material world, so we're always dealing with objects in space and our relationship to it in a way that maybe we might not in another type of existence. But there are times where you walk into a space and you feel anxious because it's so cluttered. Like you said, you walk into a hotel room, sometimes you feel peace, it's welcoming. You walk, I mean, even light and the uses of light. All those things matter, and we know psychologically that they do matter. We know that, I like red. I mean, if you ask me to, if you ask me to choose, if you were to choose a game color, I'll choose. I don't know why. I just like red. It's kind of fiery, but it's actually an irritant to your brain. It's more aggravating to your brain, and blue is a much calmer color, for example. But I like red. Maybe I'm just sort of a irritable person or something. I don't know, but but knowing and understanding the psychology of that gives us knowledge and power to basically create the environments we want to create, so that it's, one of the things I love about the Taizé community is everything's very simple, and because of that, I don't feel cluttered. I don't feel, there's no clutter anywhere. So. And in some ways,
What community?
the Taizé community. That's the one we sing chants from. We talked about the method. She talks about decluttering as a one-time celebration, and I think they all talk about this. That going back through your stuff, it really sort of draws you back into some of the stories. When why did it take 7 weeks to go through my mom's house? Because unlike my sister, who was like, I'll just dump everything. Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, I already told you that. She said it was up to her. She would almost treat it. She was going to treat the house as if, she said, it was up to me. I would just hire a big dumpster and throw everything out. And it says she would treat the house as if my mother was dead, basically. And I said, well, there are things that are living in documents, and unfortunately, because you had dementia, Mom, you're moving stuff around all over the place. So we found documents everywhere and paperwork everywhere, hidden and squirreled away. But. So literally, I said at one point to someone, everything in her house went through Shannon or my hands, and we made a decision: recycle, donate, reuse, dump, whatever. We had to make those sort of decisions: pass on, keep, save. But in doing so, it brought us through a lot of process. One of the things when we were finally, it was the last week, we were trying to get out of there, and I said everything in the attic was just done. I said it was just boxes. I said it was a lot of boxes and some old dishes. And I said, nothing up there that important. Shannon's like, well, I'm going to go look. So she goes up there, and then she comes down and she's like, do you know there are old Filipino paintings up there? And I was like, what? And so
They're all
Filipino paintings. So, and I had no idea what she's talking about. And I'm thinking they were probably these ones that had I remember there were a bunch. When we moved, we lived in another house from when I was growing up, from around my birth. In 73 till 87, 88. Our former house looked like it was occupied by a biracial family. We had a lot of Filipino stuff. Our new house that they built in the late 80s did not have anything Filipino in it, and so all this stuff got put away. So I haven't seen this stuff since I was 15.
It was in the attic.
It was in the attic. So Shannon pulls this stuff out. And if you've been in our house, you'll see there's a Filipino painting with these very round faces, and when during my marriage, I said to my dad, "Can we take this?" And it's always been. I remember it being in my living room. Mm-hmm. I didn't ever remember in 35 years, 36 years that these other paintings even existed. But when she pulled that box out, and we opened that box, and she pulled the matching paintings that are of these 3 little paintings that match the one we have in our living room, I started weeping.
Memories.
I didn't even know. It was as if I was sitting in my living room as a child, and all of a sudden I remember staring at them, and it was this emotional. And granted, it was almost 7 weeks of so I had a lot of tension built up.
Were they family members, or
No.
they special in some way?
I'll show
other than
you.
the fact that you
It is
remember
a
them?
it is a Filipino artist. Well, it is when as a child when you grow up staring at
Oh,
pictures
yeah, I understand.
in your living room, and then all of us, and I didn't even remember that they existed. Like like if I had never seen those pictures, and had Shannon not went in there and pulled those out to make sure we didn't leave anything, it was the last it was you know the 2% we left for my sister to clean out because it was mostly I thought junk up there, but all that's to say is the process of cleaning out is one that takes you back through your life,
Mhm.
and all of them talk about this. When you clean, don't look at it as pain, look at the whole process of decluttering and organizing as and you know the overarching 50,000 foot perspective of all of these. Look at this process of celebration. She says that it's a celebrate decluttering as a one-time celebration of your life. It is your year-long journey through everything that you did and have done in life, and you could and relive the pain and the joy. And then you know it's kind of one of those things you would say, oh well, I don't want to just remember it once and then never remember it again. But the truth is, we have so much junk. Sometimes we don't ever go back ever through those things, and then we get to the point, and they all talked about this. We get to the point where you're just too tired to, you know, the energy to, and then rather than having
It
a
takes a
year.
lot of energy.
It does, but it could be energy that gives you life and re-embracing the journey you've been on, with also the process of cleaning out some stuff and a gift that you can give to your children or your family or your loved ones in a way that celebrates your life, but doesn't just preserve it. Because at some point I said, you know what? I mean, you know, are Judah's kids or Judah's grandkids going to keep all the stuff from my mom and me? No, I mean, like it's gonna at some point you dump stuff. It's all going to
What'd you
get.
do with them?
What's that?
Those 3 pictures?
Oh, they're in a pod now in Albuquerque, kind of, and they'll be,
Storage.
and well, I mean, it's in transit. We're doing the, trust me, we're waiting for the pod, but it's all her stuff is in Albuquerque because we have no place to put it until the
So
stuff of
you
that.
kept them.
Everything on the upstairs of the Bluff house went downstairs, so but there's nowhere to put anything else. So, um, so yeah, we kept. Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you know, I was, you know, I think it was emotions too, but it was a very emotional thing for me. All that's to say is, it was a memory of my childhood that was incredibly meaningful in that moment, and still, and I'm thrilled to be able to put those up. But part of that is going through and knowing that's even there. So there are things that you could have in your life, in your past, that you may not even know is there. She talked about spark joy. I talked about the method, keeping what you love, and then always decluttering and organizing next. But it's declutter everything, because then what you're left with, you just know you have to store. You have to figure out how then to manage it. And her belief is if you go through the process A, that B will then be more productive. She believes that happy homes equal happy lives. You can, if you have a happy home and a crappy workspace, then you can deal with the work. You're there for temporary, but when you come home, it's your haven, it's your haven, it's your safe place. It's where you feel love. It's where you feel like you belong. It's your anchored, and that home should be a place that when you walk in, you don't feel overwhelmed by the stuff that you have. And so the whole concept is to give yourself the space and the gift of that. Okay, approaches that for according to her that don't work. Getting rid of one thing. I guess there's a whole getting rid of one thing a day at a time. That's been a method, and she thinks you lose motivation. And it doesn't really change your mindset, and so at some point you just give up. Requires actually more discipline to do that daily than it would be to commit to. And a lot, and I would say Marie Kondo's talking to everybody, not just older people in retirement age. She's talking to everyone to go through the process. But I think for those of you who no longer are in daily, you know, in weekly employment, that schedule is a lot. That's probably a recommendation for those who are trying to discipline their lives into a place of doing that. I think when you have the time that you can go through it more intensively, she's saying that she thinks that's more productive. She thinks that one room at a time is a fatal mistake for reasons that I said. You make one room perfect, then you know, but so she thinks you should declutter everything and then go back through. And I think she would say organizing one room, you know, getting everything in, get rid of everything you don't want, put everything of like things together, store them in the same location, and you're doing that sort of holistically, but that will compartmentalize itself in rooms naturally. because there are things that you would store, obviously towels near bathrooms and things like that, versus not in the basement, in the dark, in the
Kitchen stuff,
corner,
yeah.
your kitchen stuff. We know, and that's a whole other thing. So anyway, where was I? Oh, there. I guess there's a lot of things that talk about listening to music, listening to podcasts, and she does not think that's a good idea because you're not making the process of decluttering and the process of organizing are active, engaged activities. And if you do anything, and it's like anything, if you do something where you're just sort of filling in the background and you're numbing your mind a little bit, you're not actively engaging in the formation that's meant to happen because it's not just about cleaning up your stuff, it's about changing your mindset of the way you live your life. And if you're just listening or you're thinking about other things, you're engaging thought about something you're listening to your podcast, you're not actually experiencing the formation that the activity itself, therefore you're likely just to go back into the cycle again because you haven't changed how you think. It's numbing to the growth. Because oh no, that was going with the one room at a time. Also, because you're just basically moving messes, and then you have you have good rooms and bad rooms. And so you either get caught in the perfection of a good room versus again just the whole sweep. Again, which is why the whole thing has to be done. It's not, it's like we're on a mission. 7 weeks. We did 7 weeks. We cleaned out a huge house in 7 weeks because we were on a mission. If you try to do that little time over a little bit over time, it might take forever. She said the idea of aiming for numbers. Some people say, "Oh, if I haven't used it for a year, I should get rid of it." She doesn't think that because sometimes that's a false metric. It ignores values, it ignores emotions, it ignores the history or the past of it. And therefore she goes back to those things that actually give you joy. And my guess is as you start to do that process, that sense of joy or, that probably changes and morphs over time as you start to see how much stuff you have. But not to focus on numbers. Thinks it's very unhelpful to swap donation ideas, or if you purchase something you have to get rid of something. That's kind of a common thing because that just perpetuates the cycle of purchasing. You're just getting the dopamine hit from getting the purchase, and so you're just in you become a constant cycle of stuff you don't need. Better storage is often, there's a lot of books on how to store things better, and she calls them prisons. I wrote down hoarding sadness over joy. How much do we put away and store in closets and things that we really don't want, need, or care about, but yet they're still there, and we know that they're there, and we don't often psychologically realize the impact of the weight of those things actually in and of themselves. Okay, a few final things. Reasons for not letting go. And this goes back to the cognitive behavioral therapy of just understanding what's going on in your mind. Attachment to past, this is where it was earlier I mentioned, and fear of the future. We don't want to let go because we have emotional memories and things attached, or we fear the future and see a potential for something in the future. In other words, we think we might need something. What if this situation arises? What if 500 families are in the town and they all want to play a game at the exact same time? I can meet that need.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Shannon, I would say Shannon, she has made the attachment to the past, but she had actually had a traumatic childhood and doesn't have those anchored relationships. So anything she holds on to that she had is that much more meaningful. Usefulness. Sometimes we don't want to let go of things because we claim its usefulness, and we have to determine whether we claim functional value. Oh, I can use it again. It still works. Well, then why get a new one? If it's kind of like, again, my boots. I had to get rid of my old boots. They had holes in them, but I was still holding on to them. Oh, I could still wear them in the yard if I had to go pick up poop in case I don't want to get on my new boots. No, you just get rid of it, and you put the new ones in. Informational value. We have 2 sets of encyclopedias in our home because my wife values informational value and says these won't be around forever and we need to hold on. And I'm saying yes, but if the internet crashes, then we have bigger problems than whether or not I can look up a word in an Encyclopedia Britannica.
You don't want to give up Funk and Wagner.
Yeah, they're in there.
Some of those encyclopedias, though, fun to look
They're
through.
fun, I
Especially
agree.
if they're
They are.
40,
We have world
50,
books and
80
then we
years
have the
old
funk
or
one
something.
too. But I don't know if we need two sets. But then she was like, well, we'll put a set down in the house.
I mean, that's just kind of a curiosity
Or to
thing.
Yeah.
sit down with kids and go through the book.
Yeah. No, it's great. And you just give someone, you look
I don't
at
have a set.
Yeah.
But, you know.
well, I have two, so we can maybe do like a saw swap or something.
Yeah.
Just,
Saw.
you give me a couple of your saws.
To be your first
I'll give you A through G for a saw. And when you're done with that, we'll swap. The emotional value, we often hold on to things, obviously, and that's,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, that's obviously silly. And then rarity is a common excuse to why we hold on to things. Oh, it's rare. Oh, maybe worth value someday. So I bought a huge lot of Legos when I was in seminary. It was $850. Someone brought them up from Charleston. Some guy was getting a divorce, and it was like $3,000 worth of Legos. It was, all the Legos that we did. I have tons and tons of Legos. And in seminary, that was a lot of money, $850. So I was selling them off as I can. So I sold it. And one of the sets that it came with was the Imperial Star Destroyer, which at the time I was able to sell for $250, which I thought was a great deal. But it was today worth about $1,000.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: at some point, you got to sell it. And it doesn't have the value of it until you sell it. It's only, what the market dictates. So there is just that balance of the notion of rarity. Do you want to hold on to a bunch of figurines in hopes that someday they'll be worth? Because then the value of holding on to them is lost when you sell it, and then you're like buying a burger and paying your electricity bill with the money that you saved from your figurines for. There's a sense of something in there that
It
is
can be
lost.
self-destructing too, the coulda,
Yes, it
woulda,
can.
shouldas.
Yeah.
Cause you'll beat yourself up all the time going, if I'd have held it 3 more years,
Those cars.
could have been,
Well, that can apply to lots. That can apply to real estate. That can
oh yeah,
apply
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
so
I
many
mean-
things, it's unbelievable.
Can't keep everything forever.
When I got fired from the house in Seattle, we sold it for $335 in 2012. Today, it's worth over $1 million. Thought if I had just rented it. That's why I'm never selling this house here someday. Tidying, because the tidying is taking stock of our lives. We talked about that. It highlights, and really you could almost make a history of it. It highlights your interests. It highlights where you invested your money. It highlights how you made decisions throughout your life. And you can actually, if you do it thoughtfully, rather than just joy or not joy, you can actually go through the items and you can think about where they were at in your life. So for those of you who are in a retirement age, and who are wanting to declutter your lives, use it as an opportunity to experience the life that you've lived in a more intentional, thoughtful way. Because if you don't do that, you probably won't reflect upon it in any sort of systematic way. It is an opportunity to systematically think about your life, as opposed in a way that you probably wouldn't otherwise do. I mean, I'm not saying you wouldn't personally, but in general, I don't think people probably do that. Three approaches. She said you can face them now. You can face this process now. You could face it sometime, or you can face it never. Sometimes means always a burden. And if you're here listening to this, you probably think you need to clean some stuff out. I don't know, maybe you're just interested. But you can do it now, sometime, or never. And then again, that's the whole emphasis of when you do it, do it. Because then it's done, and then you've changed your mind and you've been transformed in the process. It's kind of like a self-transformation sort of thing. I think that's it in terms of her. And I think that she probably is the bulk of. Although I think I've seen the video of her and she kind of annoys me. Like she does. I mean, she was really annoying. I was like, I can't watch this. I tried to watch it. Yeah, I tried to watch it. I couldn't do it. I was trying to watch it. She's on Netflix. The other one, Margaret Magnism's on Peacock, and you can see a bunch of posts from Dana White or blogs and YouTube. There's all sorts of videos on all three of them.
Yeah.
I could not do more. I was like, it gives me joy not to listen to her talk.
Is she annoying?
I don't know. It's
So if I get this on tape, if I get a book on, well, it's not tape, but you know
yeah,
what I mean.
yeah.
Is it
An
gonna be
audio
her
book.
narrating?
I don't
Am
know.
I gonna be annoyed by her?
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Am I gonna regret my purchase?
yeah. Maybe I don't know. I really can't. Maybe you should look at you should look into the voice. You can usually get a sampler. Maybe if you don't have the visual. It wasn't working for me. I'm like, anyway. Okay, switching on to decluttering at the speed of life, which I liked that. I actually wrote light just because I wasn't paying attention, and I crossed out and left it there rather than erasing it to remind myself that it's not Decluttering at the speed of light means fast. Decluttering at the speed of light recognizes where we are all at in our Western busy worlds. That just because you're retired does not mean that you have more time to do things. It means that you fill your time differently. You know, you may not fill time with things that earn money, but you're filling. I mean, in particular, I think for those of you in this community, I think I think our folks who are in the last quarter of their life live more active lifestyles than you probably find in the average American town. So in some sense that the life continues. A few things that she just said in general, it's an enjoy. I think it would be an enjoyable engagement if these things resonate with you. She talks about order of the home too. Her 3 layers of cleaning, or well, let me come back to that. What I wrote up here, I couldn't read my own writing, was she has a strong philosophy of ordering the chaos. So although she does advocate getting rid of stuff, what she is trying to really do is again, in a little bit in the same way, but her emphasis is far more on the organization of stuff. And how it unfolds. So, but she does start with, she said there are 3 layers. You declutter, and it's a process of decluttering. And once that decluttering is, and then you also have three layers of cleaning or decluttering, or your life is daily cleaning, and then she has deep cleaning. And cleaning is not just about the dirt and the grime and that sort of thing. It's about just like the process of going through all of it. And it's kind of the idea of you do the big things first, and then you get down to the small things. You do the visible things first, and then you get to the smaller things that are deep. The closet cleaning is a deep cleaning. That if you clean what's up in front, then again, same thing. You're encouraging your mindset. You're feeling motivated. You're seeing the result. You're feeling the result. And so you save that closet that's in that you don't really want to get into, because it's not helpful, because it's discouraging. You start, it's like when we do church cleaning days, and I remember, and Amy, if you're watching this, I apologize, I'm going to tell a story about you, but she pulled everything out of that closet. It was like we were doing a 2-hour church cleaning. It was one of those, I don't know, 2 years ago. She pulled everything out of that closet. It was all over this table, and then it was like 11 o'clock and 11:30, and people were leaving for the church cleaning day, and then all of the stuff was on the table, and I was like, how on earth am I going to get through all of this stuff? I don't want to deal with that stuff. So it's like dealing with the big stuff versus pulling everything out of a small closet, because there's so much that can fit in it, and it's so much been jammed in it. But you're going to have to go through those steps. She has a sort of 6 principles, I guess, that she runs through. One is the idea of what she calls the container concept. And she calls our homes containers. And she says she believes that everything that we have in our lives needs a place. And the reason we have clutter is because the things that don't have places, we don't know where to put them. And we're just shifting them around, and we're trying. And if it has a home, then it can go there, and it will give us a sense of everything has a place. She uses, what is that right here? Pens. She was talking about pens. That the pen, we all have too many pens. And if you go in a drawer and there's just a bunch of rando pens in there, and everyone, and like all the pens are in the drawer, half of them work, half of them don't. So taking the principle of all of this decluttering, you would go through and you'd say which one of these pens don't work. If they don't work, they need to be tossed. If they do work, you don't throw them back into a big mess in the drawer. That's how you propagate the mess. Well, what do? Well, you put them in a container. You put them in a jar. You put them in a little pencil box. You put them and they have a location. Well, then you have the question of, now that you've put it in a container, where do you put that container? That container needs a home. Well, where's the most reasonable place that you might need to access pen? Maybe your kitchen, maybe your living room, maybe an office. But then all of the pens that you have are in one location, in a place, as a home, has a storage. And that's the difference between someone who has an ordered life, when you walk into their, it's like, versus a disordered life, where, there's.
I want to know how to make the new pens that I buy keep from disappearing, and the crummy pens that don't work appear.
Yeah. Don't get the crummy pens.
Well, the ones I need to throw away, because I've got a box of I mean, that's a big.
Oh, trust
Don't
me.
throw away all the pins.
Oh, when we're
Then they, all the ones that don't, yeah.
when we're done with this, I will show you a picture of the pens that we went through at my mom's house. We did this. We went through. I said, go through the whole house. Everywhere you see a cup of
A
pens.
shoebox full or more?
Oh no, it was a table this size, maybe a little smaller than this, filled with
One
pens.
load
Hundreds of pens,
Wow.
hundreds of pens,
Yeah.
all over the house, everywhere. It's swirled in different places and locations. So
But
anyway,
if you need one in that location,
and most of them didn't work.
They have to be blue.
So it was a great activity for my mom. She and Silas sat there and sorted and organized, and we kind of went that way. And markers too, markers galore. So, but the concept of the container is that your home is a container, your rooms are containers, every storage solution you have are containers. So this entire building, Darley Hall, is a container. And within this, that room is a container, that the kitchen's a container, the bathrooms, the closets, this room, they're all separate containers. The shelves are containers. And the Rubbermaid container, the name tag thing. It's a contain that is a form of an organization container. It's holding those name tags. Little baskets over there are holding tea. We're micro organizing things, and she said the key is once everything has a location, you put it where it's location. So that's why we're talking about, even I think about the name tags. We're gonna, I said if we put some screws, it'd be nice if they all hung up there, and then everyone knows where the name tags go. They're all organized, they're all there, and they have a home, and therefore there's no reason for Christian Hartman to take them home and leave it in his room because it has a place right there on the wall. I think it was Levi that I printed my fourth one or something. Okay, so the first step was to understand your entire home as a container, and in that go through that process. And if you can think in that way, then you can start to organize. Think about your space over stuff, and this is where I don't think everyone values open space over stuff. I think that that's an individual personal care. Although I do think, in the same way, I would argue that I think everyone's monastic on some level. I think that we all have that on like the base human level. I think there probably is some level in all of us that would say, if I had the choice of having harmony over disharmony, I would choose harmony. I think that's what she's trying to say. But I do think there was an overemphasis in the book about minimalizing space and decluttering space and having it be open and clean and clean counters.
Well, but she's also probably writing to people who live in a city, a big city, maybe in apartments, maybe in just.
I mean,
I mean, here we're blessed.
No, this is she's a North American white, she's a American white lady. This woman, the decluttering.
No, I understand, but she's probably writing to people that live in a city.
Yeah.
In a place where we don't, I mean, here we have this huge amount of open space.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying.
And I'm just,
I think she's saying like in a room, getting rid of the stuff and having like clear counters.
yes.
And I think that quite frankly, I think that's a Western ideal. And I think it's an Eastern ideal in the sense of Japanese, but that comes with minimalism. I think that, I've often compared my German white side of my family, who is Western Standard American sort of, versus my Filipino side. Filipinos don't view their houses as places to portray or show. Like there's no sense of like, come see how nice my living room looks and how perfect the flowers are and how, and I have the sense of we have, again, with all the stuff we talked about, the expectation of having a room or a space in our house that someone walks in and it feels like a hotel lobby or, perfect, or and that impression again gives something off as well. But that sense of valuing that the perfection or the portrayal of order is something that I think Americans have over and against non-Western Europeans.
Some of us, that's the only way we can feel comfortable and relax.
Yes, because I think we've been conditioned to some extent. Well, yeah, but if you did it through your whole house, you would be. But I think that's what all of this is saying is that really we shouldn't. But I think that there's a difference between saying this is my home that I'm surrounded by things that are important to me in an orderly fashion where I feel comfortable and at peace versus there's lots of extra stuff, or I'm just trying to order this room to make it look perfect so that people think I have an ordered life where every closet is filled with junk.
Yeah.
And so that's not balance. That's
Yeah.
the portrayal of balance, but that's an internal, it actually leaves you more anxious because you feel the dissonance in your own spirit between the life you're portraying versus the life you're living on a far deeper philosophical level. Start with the visible and then go to closets, and because it encourages progress. So start on the big things. I think I probably used that philosophy in here. I don't know if you all remember this space. It was filled with children's chairs and toys and things, and it was used as just a space that was kind of a storage place.
Think about the annex.
Oh man, don't even, oh
I
yeah.
mean, Hector's trailer got,
I mean, yeah, it was, and honestly, think about the meaning behind that too. I mean, when you think about the significance of the annex to our ministry as a community, and I go back and I do think that's a God thing. Like I said, I was traveling around, went to a lot of churches. When I went to the pulpit in here, I was like, yeah, it's a pulpit, it's a nice, cute church. But despite the fact when I walked in there, it stunk and it was filled with old sofas. When I walked in that space, and gross things. I walked in and I said, I wouldn't ask someone in this congregation.
This annex?
Oh yeah.
A few years ago?
Before when I got here, when I interviewed, it was disgusting. It was like I wouldn't have sat down on one of those
they would let
sofas
people donate couches.
Oh my
and
God.
bring
From
them over
hotels.
sight unseen.
Oh,
with no black
Put in
lights.
there. I could tell you the number of.
you just really
I know.
grossed me out with
Yeah.
that whole black
Yeah,
light
yeah.
thing.
Trust me, I have it. I still have black light if you want to borrow it if you're going on a trip.
I
Um,
never went in it before it turned into what it is now.
So again, going back to the layers of clean foam, there's decluttering, and once you get to the point where you've decluttered your life, you're actually in a good place to start doing some of that daily cleaning where you don't have all that stuff cluttering everything, and you can maintain that. And then once you have that sense of balance, it gives you time and space to do the deeper cleaning. She said that she thinks that people. Actually, I wrote down. She says donate. When you talks a lot about donating. I agree. Donating is good, but I think she's sort of like more like my sister is like just get rid of everything. And I think that Marie Como would say that it's not just about getting rid of everything, it's about thoughtfully doing the things, because that process of it's not just about getting rid of stuff, it's about getting rid of stuff thoughtfully and intentionally. And there's a process that we're formed in doing that, not only telling our story of the past, but just sort of and release and being and saying, I thought through this. I wasn't just, oh, I shouldn't have got rid of that. But no, I thought through this. She also talks a lot about mindset. She talks about the usefulness of stuff versus the using of stuff, and this is where I think we get into the Christian community. Like there are ways that we can make the stuff there's stuff that we use daily, like a lawnmower that you just have, and then there's stuff that feels useful and we don't want to get rid of it. Well, that's maybe where we should have a more robust sharing system. But even that is the mentality of, oh, I want my own. The amount of times, and I'll say this, I'm always going to point by myself, the amount of times that even in the past 4 years that I've played a game that Tori has bought, Tori Stevens down, we played in our game group, and we play a game, and I love the game, and I'm like, oh, I have to go get my own copy. Well, I don't have to get my own copy. Well, he's not a Christian, so he doesn't have like the internal faith sharing thing, but I'm sure he would let me still borrow it. But you know what I'm saying.
Some of that is when I need it, or I don't want to inconvenience the person that I borrowed it from.
Also, independent Western,
Yeah,
self-preservation value. Just to name
John
it.
And it's
Yeah.
we're neighbors, and we share a lot of like to make
Yeah, maker things.
like to play with power saws.
Yeah.
But so he's like, I need a wheelbarrow. I think I need a wheelbarrow. I'm like, borrow mine, use mine, and I've got one. Don't go buy a wheelbarrow. I don't, but extra rarely need the wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
There's no reason for him to then have to store. Yeah, he can easily. Wheelbarrows aren't that much,
But this comes.
why trip
Yeah.
over it?
But yeah, here's the thing. It goes back to the fact that we now live in a day and age where we can all buy our own wheelbarrows. We have the means.
Right.
We have the products are available and ample supply in all different varieties. We have the means. It doesn't affect our means, so why wouldn't we?
Right.
And then the question becomes, if we're saving all this money now by not buying over, repeating stuff, what are we doing with the money? I mean, it all goes back to this deeper system of how living our lives in a way that's intentional.
Well, but talking about the sharing, that's what a library is. And there are some towns going to the tools that actually have
Yeah, sharing library. Yeah.
libraries for tools.
Well, they used to have the free store here,
Yes, yes.
but someone, it
The
used to be
free
called the
store.
free store, where people just dropped off things like that they didn't need anymore, and other people picked them up. But the problem is that it also facilitates
Junk.
Well, then
so.
you get, then you get nasty old.
The
Cowboys.
amount of hoarding that so when I did a lot of stuff on Facebook, and it was so bad. At first I tried to sell these individual things or give away individual things. After emailing with someone or texting, messaging someone on Facebook for 3 days about coming to get all these, bags and bags of pens, I was like, forget it. Like, I'm not gonna. So basically I started doing these, like, all the stuff we're trying to get rid of that we want to, like, hopefully go to somebody, or just going to go in the garage. And then I was going to do these, like, come between 4 and 6 and see what's here. And then I'll do another one in a week.
Sure.
The level of greed that you could tangibly see in someone's face, it kind of made me sick. Like, they come in and they're like, and I'm like, the stuff on this and this part of the garage is all for takes. Well, then they're like looking around, and the amount of people who were like, what about that? No.
Oh,
The
yeah.
stuff that is in the center of the garage is what you
Yeah.
can take. If I had wanted to include the stuff on the wall, I would have said also the stuff. But it's just that sense of when something is free, we want more. We have to hold, there's a sense of, and again, that goes back to are you fearful of the future, or are you emotionally attached to the
But
past?
that'll work a little different in some respects, because my youngest son is a heck of a salesperson. Worked for Salesforce and all sorts of people doing stuff and doing real well. He's selling off Carrie's brother's things in the garage, and he's got an electric lawnmower. And he's got it up for $25, and nobody's taking it. And he goes, okay, here's what you do.
You raise it to
He
50.
raised to 60.
Yeah.
And the guy comes over,
And they'll give you 25.
I'll take it right now. He bought it and he turned the thing up, pointed it towards his girlfriend where the fan was, turned it on. We're like, whoa, whoa. He took it and put it right in there and just in the truck.
Yeah.
It was value.
Yeah.
If it was $25, it was not worth it.
Yeah.
$60, it was worth every
That was
dime
a
he was
good
paying
deal.
for it.
Yeah, we had
So
a,
instead of lowering the price, raise it, make the value.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
you
right.
told the story about the free.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and that's about it for that book. They give you some guides going through the rooms that are kind of helpful. Again, I would pick and choose. If you're doing that room, read that before you do it. It's not. And then the third part 3 is helping others. That actually had some good information. If you're tasked to help your family members, friends, some guidance, some practical guidance there, and then special needs if you're moving in an emergency. So it's a good book. It's also done very well. It's very practical, but very much less on the decluttering emphasis side and more on the like organizing your stuff side, and decluttering, but not as much as that. Okay, the last thing I have is The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. It was looked at by many as a celebration. Margarita Magnusson was in her 80s, and this came out in 2018, and was in her 80s, and so someone who's reflecting upon life. Again, I don't think these methods, was this a method that existed 50, 100 years ago? Probably not, because again, people didn't have stuff.
Yeah.
I have 3 pictures of my great-grandmother. Silas's children will have 17 boxes if we don't curate them and get rid of them. In a very short amount of time, that's and I think those are extreme. Not the 3, but I think that my father was when my father retired, and then when he realized that he could print pictures off of Facebook, we have photo albums of people who I don't know, and I don't know if he knows, but he was like, oh, pictures, and he was printing them out and making photo albums. He was just spending, yeah. So there's, I would say probably at least, 10 of those.
I look at the ability to
Yes.
scan or take a picture or something is a good way to help you get rid of it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I have external drive after I don't know how many. I probably have a half a dozen external drives from various parts of my life that all have pictures that I took digitally from those parts of my lives.
I know.
Some of those are integrated, some of them are not. Will I ever go back and look at them? Probably not.
I know, but they're not taking up a lot of space.
They're not, but they
And someday they'll just go poof. And
But-
they won't destroy the environment going poof.
I agree with that, but I also think just the very philosophy of trying to capture everything in a picture that we will never probably look at again, or, I actually prefer to use my phone sometimes as a tool to remember stuff. Or, if someone gives me their business card, I'll take a picture of it, like, you know what, it's gonna be in the cloud. If I need it, I'll get it there. Again, one more thing, I don't want one more thing that I have to make a decision of whether or not to throw out. Expo halls, and when I worked in the national office 5.5 years going to expos, we went in, and the amount of pens that go through production to expo halls to people's homes to trash is ridiculous. It's an atrocity because none of them ever work.
Right.
And then if you do find, oh, this pen works good, you go back to that booth and you get like 2 or 3 of them because you love it. That's not what it's
That's where
intended
the
to.
greed comes in.
Yeah, it is.
Because
Do you know
it's
how, like, I don't even know, like, I took pictures of some of this stuff. The amount of, like Filipinos are bad. This is like like even Joe Coy is a Netflix comedian, talks about, growing up, his family his mom would be like, go get extra, Joseph, extra napkins, extra ketchup packet, extra saltine. And I remember my father, despite being a doctor, still would go into a restaurant and stuff saltines in his pocket before he left, because the mentality of holding on and grabbing these extra, all stuff. So love you, Dad. Okay, a couple other things just from the cleaning out your home is a gift to your loved one, or cleaning out your home so your loved ones don't have to do it is the basic principle of the book. And that Swedish Art of Death thing is written to people in the last phase of their and they say when your kids are no longer in the home and before you're old enough to where it becomes a burden. And this is a huge problem. People just, oh, I'll do it later, I'll do it later. Or I'll just get, have my son do it. Just kidding.
We've been kind of working
Just kidding,
after
Mom.
going through Karen's mom's
Yeah, man.
things, which is pretty much all done. Although there's a lot of those things in shipping containers down in.
There you go.
Condition,
You do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
but we've kind of, hey, we don't want to leave our kids with this, but even if we started now, it's still huge. And
Well, that's why I think it's saying do it all.
We're still young.
Yes. And you're probably, I think that, and I would say you're probably the 65 to 80 bracket would be where she would probably argue you do that cleaning. But if you couple that with the Marie Combo thing, I mean, like, it's like get it done, and then live your life in freedom.
And my mom just asked all of us, what do you want? So our name is on it. She kept that.
Yeah.
And then she downsized
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah, I did a lot of I made a lot of the kids' furniture and so on and so forth. This one had a good shop. Anyway, my son was just old enough, and he made this wooden box. I mean, it's ugly. I mean, nailed,
Poor thing.
I mean, it's really, and I've kept that for 40 years.
Yeah.
And, he was making it with me out in the shop. And I finally,
We just took it to him.
we just took it to him, and I know he went home and chunked it,
Yeah.
but to me it was precious.
Well, she has an answer to that. Jumping ahead, she calls it a throwaway box. And that is that you keep a box that has things that you recognize as being meaningful to you, but only to you. And so that then no one carries the burden on of having to store things that they think were like, in other words, that doesn't mean anything to anyone else. And when you're gone, that's in a throwaway box, and that just gets pitched because it only is going to mean something to you.
Right.
And again, it's a categorization. So she sees this all as an act of consideration and love. She says it's the same thing with the other ones. It's therapeutic. You can relive your life. You have the time. When you have the time, passing on to others, and particularly those in need, and not accumulating, is a value of doing this in the time where you don't need all the extra stuff. And if you need, and oftentimes if you did, I bet you if you gave away all 9 of your I'm sorry, I keep picking on you. If you gave away tomorrow all of your circular saws, the truth is if you needed a circular saw, you have the means to go out and buy one.
But then, Hector called me the other day, evidently the art center is getting a new countertop.
Yeah.
But he called me, it only has a live edge, and he needs to trim it down, and he called me, to see if we could use my new precious track saw.
Your precious track saw. There you go.
Yeah.
See, it's already
So
coming.
we're
Did you
gonna-
have it?
Well, no, he hadn't gotten it yet.
But the
He
truth
went over
is-
and it's 1.5 inches thick.
But
But
the truth is, Roy, if you gave them all away, not saying you need to or suggesting you do to, but just an example, and same with the board. Let's take it off Roy, put it on me. For a long time, I was like, hey, you can borrow this board game, but don't make sure you don't eat while you're wash your hands, don't listen to pieces, don't mess and bring it back to me. And then there's a point where I was like, what do I care? The truth is, there is not any game that I own in my collection that is so dear to me that if a piece was lost, that really would matter. And there's also not a game in the collection that usually games are $30 to $50. If someone, I would rather at that point be like, here, you can just keep the game. In fact, this happened. We actually get Doug, if you're watching this, sorry, I'm telling the story. We gave someone a game. We loaned someone or some of our friends some games, and then we went over to visit them one day, and we saw the game all over the floor. And I was like, yeah, those pieces are probably not ever going to come back in there. So we were like, just keep it. And it was a hard thing to do, and I was annoyed at the time, like why, But at the same time, it goes back to again the getting back to the Christian stuff and the theological stuff. This is just stuff.
Right.
It doesn't really matter, and we have the means. It's not as if as I'm saying, you could buy hundreds of circular saws.
Right, well, but I don't need them.
But you would if you got rid of all the other ones. If you get rid of all your 9 circular saws, then you have a need to buy a new one. Okay, I'm just joking. You know that I love you, Roy.
It's a fun subject.
The other thing, it goes back to the opposite of passing on something that someone doesn't want, but the memories and love that live through shared possessions. And that if they're utilized, they become shared. Like the paintings that we just got, will for my boys become something because they know how meaningful they are to us. They've always been there in our home for most of their lives. They'll want those in their homes too. So the meaning gets passed on, and that allows you to sometimes determine between that which is loved and that which is not. Timing, it says when your children are out of the house, or before you're too old or tired to do it, essentially. Space, she says go space by space, room by room, and this is again contradictory to others. She's saying do it one or the other, item by item, a little bit in the same sense of holding it, but she's saying do one space at a time, whereas Marie Kondo would say do it all. Again, there are good reasons for both of them. I kind of like the declutter. I think if you're gonna do it little by little, I understand why you would lose motivation, but I think in general, if you're really trying to declutter your life, the idea of doing it all at one time is probably the most effective. She says get rid of, and then breaks that down to you can share stuff. So just, to bring up random people, you can sell stuff, you can donate stuff, and then sometimes that is just general donation to a thrift store. Sometimes that's a specific donation to families in need. It's with an eye. Oh, I see this person has this lack, I have extra, I'm going to fill that need right away. Sometimes it does need to go to trash, sometimes it needs to be recycled. And she actually goes into something that says if you have anything in your life that is embarrassing or that would cause pain to anyone else after you die, that you should get rid of it now. Because in this stage of life, because you're never going to be in a position where you can pull that back and you can do it. So if you have any concern, if my kids found this, if there's a letter from,
letter,
whatever it is,
what it would
your big bag of weed, you don't want to,
Your court appearance,
Your
back at such and such. date.
Okay, got it.
no one wants to find your bong.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing. You should get rid of it now. It's something you'd be embarrassed by
Well,
if someone found.
personalized, my
Yeah.
son probably would like that.
Yeah. So, what does that say? I don't even know. Oh, she also talks about the difference between collecting and people collect things with intention. I was like, okay, I get. And then they're in hoarding, which is a compulsion. And even in the gaming world, using myself as an example again, there's this trend of when they make a game, they make these expansions, and some games have like 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 expansions, all these little things, and people feel like they have to have it complete because that's an internal compulsion, as opposed to a recognition of no, I don't. It's not
That's great
necessary.
marketing.
It is.
And that goes back to the marketing.
Yeah, it is, and
Sure.
creating a sense of need, and then it's kind of like in a sense of completion. Um, Arranging versus using. In other words, don't just arrange your stuff and organize it, but figure out what you're going to use. Because arranging is hoarding and using is more utilitarian. If you're just arranging all your stuff on the event that you might use it, then that's hoarding. If you arrange your stuff by what you actually use, that's a more of a using mentality. And then I'll end with this. She says, a loved one wishes to inherit nice things from you, not all things from you. And again, that's a modern problem that we're experiencing really for the first time. If you go back 100 years, the amount of things that you were leaving people were so minuscule. And because most of the stuff we owned were more of utilitarian nature. And I think that she hints at this and the notion of death. It's not a morbid thing. I actually think that this process, given our current culture, is a more it normalizes death. It puts the material world that we live in into perspective in a way that is 100% healthy and in line with the scriptures. I think it deals with Christian witness. It says that what we've been talking about in church, this is not our life. And it reprioritizes the stuff that we all in the Western world have been caught up in. We are a nation of consumers. We're not a nation of producers. We're not a nation of makers, although that's why it's, cool and sexy to have maker spaces, because it's like the idea of doing something real that has intrinsic value versus just all this other stuff that we fill our lives. I mean, even the books that I pulled out of all those books in the libraries, things like this is, again, stuff. Maybe really, should we even have the books that we have? Probably not. Most people aren't going to really even look at them. So it comes back to the question of why even have them? Now, if you might say, again, the excuse of rarity, what if the apocalypse comes and then we'll need some theology books? If the apocalypse comes and we aren't sound in our theology, we have bigger issues. We won't probably be running in here and pulling books off the shelf. So it comes back to that idea of stuff. Now I say that, knowing I just purchased a shaved ice machine, which is something that none of us had, so we needed that to share amongst ourselves.
It was amazing.
All right, and that's it. I think that as a whole, I think we can, I think we can all see where this is going. We're called not to live in this world. We're called not to consume. We're called not to accumulate. We're called to live our lives in a self-sacrificial way. And the burden of wealth that comes with stuff is the burden that many of us in the Western world face. And in that burden comes in varying intensities, and we're all going to have to wrestle with that on our own accord. There are 3 methods here amongst many other ones, that living without a year, without a purchase, lots of things we can do to sort of reorient our lives. One thing I would say is I do agree, in particular for those of you in a retirement age, the one thing that stood out to me in all of this was the idea of doing it in one go. Like, we're going to get ourselves organized, we're going to start this, we're going to begin the process, we're going to go through it. I think that the most transformation and the potential for the longest lasting effect comes through that effort. If you just chip away at it, it's just going to be, if you can always put it off for tomorrow. So, all right, any final thoughts before we close out? 8-week excursion into something that I was a joke from the pulpit.
The stuff, the desire for stuff and things at the cause of wars and human strife.
Well, that's a pretty big question to throw out at the very end.
This could be your
Is
next.
this all?
This could be your next.
Yeah. I think. Well, let me to answer.
We're entering an era where we might be in the beginnings of World War III.
Yes, and to answer your question, Roy, at 100% connected, because the other books that I really didn't even talk about that I spent much of my MDiv looking at, I got very into fair labor. I mean, there was a while where we were getting rid of anything that was made in China. And then as you grow, like everything, you kind of grow numb to the idea and you stop thinking about it. And Costco shirts are $10. Why would, why would I buy them? Well, the fact of the matter is in order for us to live the lives that we live and consume the way we continue the consumption patterns that we have established means that we're doing so on the backs of someone
Yeah,
else's
that's
slave
right.
labor. And we know that.
You gotta exploit.
And we ignore it. I mean, everything. There's very little that, and as much as I think, I don't think we're prepared to bring all of that labor back to the country. I don't think we're prepared to bring all the manufacturing back because we're not prepared to pay for those prices. And the reason in part that have been able to consume and at the rate and that we can, and the reason we're in the situation we have all this stuff is because we've made the stuff so cheap. Again, and this is not a promotion of Marxism, because I know, and although I think Marx was highly misunderstood in the same way Calvin was often misunderstood, early Marx is very Christian. It's like, how can you exploit, how can you in your life benefit from any way, shape, or form something that's on the basis of someone else's labor? And it was the idea that everyone should own the products of their labor. Now, granted, it was a different time in society. It wasn't dealing with this stuff, but at the core, and it led to other things. In later writings, he got a little bit more, and what we associate now with Marxism or communism. But in his early form, in the Parish Lectures, he talks just about the association of one's own labor with one's own benefits of that labor. And the fact that we, through very little labor, benefit off someone else's labor so that we can have the luxury lifestyle that we have and have all this extra income then to do other things is something, the fact that realistically, as we know as Christians, we really should wrestle with more than what we do. But it's very easy to turn a blind eye collectively because, it's nice to have extra money to do stuff. Yeah, so maybe that's another topic we should challenge. But that's it for now. So this is the end of this series, and thanks for joining.